Hello and welcome back. Today we are going to be making a Squishmallow purse. I've made a couple of these over on my TikTok and so far so good. It's been fun. Today I'm going to be breaking down how I do that. This is just my way of doing things. If you want to do it another way, that is totally your call, but people have been asking me for tutorials, so here we go. Things that you will need. One, a Squishmallow. The one in this video is about 10 inches, but usually they work best with around 8 to 10 inches. I've made coin purses in the past, which is relatively the same concept, just shrunk down. You need some sort of fabric for the lining. I do about like 10 by 14 inches for a 10-inch Squishmallow. You need 2 of those. And then you need some sort of webbing along with the equipment to build the strap. And I will link all of the stuff that I used in my Amazon storefront if you fancy checking it out. You also need some sort of zipper. I buy them in bulk. They're about like, I want to say 10 cents each. You can also go to Joann's and they have them there, but they're gonna run for about like $1 or $2 each, depending on what you buy. You'll also need thread as well as a sewing machine. You could technically sew it by hand, but that would kind of be a lot, so that's your call. I like to get thread that matches the zipper as well as thread that matches the lining. So let's get into how I do it. If you have any questions, feel free to message me on Instagram. But yeah, let's get started. Alrighty, the first thing we have to do is take the stuffing out. So I'm going to use a seam ripper and I'm going to go along this edge. Now, if you're doing this for the first time, I would definitely pick a Squishmallow that doesn't have like ears or horns or anything, just because they tend to get in the way and it's hard to line them back up if they get out of place. I end up pinning them down with a pin as I'm seam ripping the edge. It's up to you. It's definitely tricky, and be careful as you're seam ripping because the pins can stab you. After I get this whole entire seam out, it kind of looks like this, and I'm gonna go ahead and take all of that stuffing out. Now, I'm not gonna need all of it because we need to allow for space so that we can put stuff in the bag, but for now I'm just gonna take all of that stuffing and put it to the side. Once you've taken all of the stuffing out, it's really important to flip the whole entire Squishmallow inside out. This will just allow for all of the seams and different things that we're about to sew to line up more evenly. Like I said in the intro, I buy my zippers in bulk. That being said, sometimes the zippers don't work, so you have to test them out prior to installing it on your bag. Once I've made sure the zipper is all good, I'm going to kind of mark out the middle and pin that along the side, making sure that the zipper is facing downwards. So right now we're looking at the back side of the zipper, and I'm gonna go ahead and sew that along the outer edge. And I always do a little reverse stitch when I first start out. This just holds it in place. It's like putting a knot in the sewing. So I'm gonna go ahead and just sew along this line on both sides, trying to get as close to the edge as possible. The foot that I have on my sewing machine right now is called a zipper foot. It's specifically made for this so you can get a closer edge. And there's multiple ways to install a zipper. This is just how I like to do it. Next, I'm going to take the webbing and I'm going to create some loops for our bags to hang on. I like to make the straps removable because it makes it easier for cleaning, as well as it gives the option of if you want a separate color to switch it out, depending on what you're feeling. So I'm going to go ahead and cut about 4 inches. It's folded over right now. The more the merrier. Honestly, you would rather have too much than not enough. So I'm going to go ahead and line up what I just cut and cut again because we need 2, because we have 2 loops to make. And I'll list all of these supplies as well as the specific measurements in the description as well. I'm just going ahead and looping it around and putting a pin in it to keep it secure for now. Then I'm going to go back to my bag, which we set aside earlier after I've done both of those, and I'm going to go ahead and seam rip a hole on the edge where I want the strap to land. I did it a couple inches down. It's up to you. After I've done one side, I'm going to fold the squish in half, and I'm going to try to line it up the best I can so that the holes on each side match up. After I've done that to both sides, I'm going to take those little loops that we made earlier, and I'm going to put them in with the ring facing forward. And then I'm going to pin it with about 3 pins just so it stays secure while I'm sewing it up. So then I go ahead and repeat that same process to the other side. And then I'm going to take my sewing machine and just sew along that edge. I do like to go over it a couple of times just because this is what's going to be holding the weight of the bag. So it needs to have a lot of reinforcement in my opinion. Next, I'm going to be cutting out the lining. Like I said earlier, this is going to be about a 10 by 14 rectangle and you need 2 of those. And don't worry y'all, I do lint roll this before I put it together. This black fabric really takes on the Squishmallow fluff. But yeah, so I cut out 2 rectangles and we're gonna go ahead and fold that top edge over and iron it down. This is not necessarily needed, but it helps when you're trying to get that clean edge. So I go ahead and fold the fabric in half and I'm lining it up with the seam of the Squishmallow. Keep in mind the squish is still inside out and I'm gonna go ahead and pin that down. My thought process behind this is that I have the zipper sewn in place and then I'm sewing in the lining itself, and then I'm gonna also fabric glue the raw edge down just as a safety precaution because this is a functional object, like it needs to be able to hold weight. So here's what it looks like so far. I'm gonna sew along that edge and it's really important to make sure that you only catch the zipper part of the Squishmallow and the lining because it's very easy to grab the other Squishmallow underneath as you're sewing. So be careful, you only got 3 layers there, and that's what it looks like. And when I was talking about gluing down the raw edge earlier, this is what I meant. There's just like a tiny little lip. You could leave it just like this if you fancied, but I like to reinforce this edge. I just glued it down real quick and then waited for that to dry. Definitely be careful and do not glue the zipper down. That would be tragic. So I'm going to take those 2 edges and I'm going to line them up and pin along that edge. And at this point I have closed the zipper. If you wanted to, you could be fancy and add another pocket, but this is just a simple basic tutorial on how to get it looking like a purse. So I went ahead and pinned that up, and then I sewed along this outer edge. I'm going to point to it here in just a second. And I do end up going back over those little hoops that we had sewn earlier, just as an extra precaution. You don't have to, but I find it really helps and makes the bag stronger. So after we've sewn the lining, I'm going to go to the bottom of the squish, and there is this little seam that they have added in, and this is what closes up the Squishmallow when they make it. And I'm gonna go ahead and pop those stitches out to make a little hole so I can flip the Squishmallow right side out. Definitely make sure that you've gotten all your pins out before this process because you do not want to get stabbed. I find it easier to pull through the little jump rings as you're flipping it inside out, and then the rest of it is kind of the system that I use. Once you've gotten it right side out, it's time to add the stuffing back in. Now, something that has really helped me is that I add a little 5-inch Squishmallow into the bag while I'm adding the stuffing back in. I found that this helps me recognize when to stop adding stuffing because you want room to actually put stuff in there. If you put too much of the Squishmallow fluff back in there, then you won't have room to do what you want to do. Once you have all of the stuffing back in there and as evenly distributed as possible, I go ahead and finish it up with a ladder stitch. So basically what it is you're going to grab the edge on each side and continue to do this as you go upwards. And eventually when you hit the end, it will close up and look like it's an invisible stitch. I will pin the tutorial that I learned off of, but yeah, it's nothing too crazy and it makes it look nice. I definitely recommend going over it once or twice. Again, this is a functional item, so it needs to have some durability that a normal Squishmallow probably wouldn't. Once I hit the end of the stitch, I like to tie a regular knot. This is good because if I ever need to open the Squishmallow back up, I'll be able to find where I ended, so I don't have to create a new opening, basically. And once I've pulled it so you can't see the stitch anymore, this is when I create the knot and go ahead and trim off the excess. And I didn't forget about our little friend we put in there earlier. We have to go on a rescue mission, and sometimes the lining does pop out at you a little bit. Just push that back in. Now I'm gonna make the removable strap. I go ahead and take one of these buckles and thread it through like this. I'm gonna sew over that a couple times, just going back and forth, making sure it's nice and secure. Once I have that, I'm gonna thread one of these hooks all the way through, and then I'm gonna thread the end of that through the buckle, basically. Then I'm going to take another hook, put it on the end, and I'm going to sew a little X at the bottom. Once I have the strap all sewn up and secure, I'm going to go ahead and take a lighter and finish up the edges by burning them. It's very important that you double check the material of your webbing. The one I'm using right here is a synthetic plastic based webbing, so it just like melts the plastic at the end and doesn't fray is the idea. But definitely double check that. So I go ahead and put this on the squish, and then you can adjust the strap as you fancy. And there you have it. She looks pretty cute. Again, I'll link the specifics below, and be sure to tag me if you end up trying this out. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's been kind of interesting switching from TikTok to here. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.